2 full games, a short DLC, more than 40 hours of brilliant interactive storytelling. Last of Us is one of the craziest roller coaster rides of linear storytelling in all of games, and likely even beyond games. We're going to discuss the good, like level design and character development, the bad, like the stickiness of some of the controls and mechanics, and the overall design that made this one of the greatest selling game series of all time and spawned a streaming series. Buckle up, astronaut, because there's a lot to talk about in the story of Joel and Ellie sneaking through a zombie-infested America, making friends, and lots of other horrible things that come along the way. So let's dive into it. Let's talk about The Last of Us. Welcome to the game design review of The Last of Us. First off, before we dive into anything, tons of spoilers. Like, we will be spoiling countless plot points of this game with absolutely reckless abandon. So if it is a game you want to go enjoy, or you haven't finished the streaming series and you don't want spoilers for that, like, save this video for another time once you've gotten through it, because we will be diving into all of those. We will be talking about the character development. We will be talking about story and gameplay. More or less everything will be spoiled as part of this video. So that's fair warning. Save this for later if you don't want anything spoiled as far as this game is concerned. But first off, one of the absolutely shining stars of this game, in my opinion, is the level design. And a lot of times people don't really understand what level design is. Like, what does level design truly entail? Level design is basically taking the mechanics you've been given. Like, a game designer will go in and create these mechanics. We want our game to have crafting and exploration and action, and it's a shooter, and you build these mechanics, and level designers are basically responsible for taking those mechanics and making them flow within any given chapter or level, or however you want to break that game down. That's more or less what you're breaking it into. I spent years as a level designer. I specifically worked on Tale of Despero and doing its level design, and it's a practice that I love, because you get to take these mechanics that you've built as a game designer and really put the rubber to the road and say, okay, how are we going to use these mechanics? We said we wanted this and this and this. Well, how do I make sure to use those within the level? And how do we make sure that across the entire game, levels aren't neglecting mechanics and stuff like that? And I really think The Last of Us shines in that level design. You have a ton of variants and a ton of different types of levels and different types of flow, and you kind of move to and fro those fairly seamlessly. Like, it doesn't feel out of the ordinary when you're kind of looking at these different levels. But as we talk about some of these different types of levels, you have a lot of indoor sort of tight spaces, slow, methodical movement. You're using cover to kind of get around the zombies. Some of the levels I think of there is, like, you have the Pittsburgh in part 1. You have moving around Pittsburgh. You're kind of moving from apartment to apartment and from storefront to storefront, and kind of like running across the street to dive into another storefront. And you're really using cover as your heavy game mechanic. There's action and there's sneaking and that kind of stuff, but really you're utilizing the slow sort of indoor tight space and the methodical movement a little bit more. You see it again, like you see it in part 2. The news station. Once you get to the news station in Seattle, you really have to kind of keep your head on a swivel inside that news station, because you have enemies coming in from all angles. You maybe have a zombie horde down on one side, and then you have other like you have wolf and other things kind of coming in for these other sides, and you never know what angle someone might come from. So you really have to sort of utilize that cover, take things a lot slower than you normally would. It's you think of Last of Us as like a zombie action game, but these indoor tight spaces really require you to kind of rethink that. One of my other favorites in this vein is the aquarium. In part 2, as Ellie, you get to that aquarium, you're kind of searching for Abby, and you get to that aquarium, and there's this unsettling ambiance to the level design where you really don't know, like every time you get in the water, like I half expected to like have to fight a shark or something that was maybe like left around in the aquarium. And it has a sort of like deep, dark kind of ambiance, and really the ambience that gets set with some of these levels is fantastic, and that aquarium was no different. I liked the slow, methodical movement I kind of took because I was kind of on edge. Aside from that, you have the outdoor levels as well. You have these giant outdoor spaces that you have to cover, where you're saying like, hey, we have to get to these different parts of the city. And it's a little bit different where you have these wide open spaces. You're not ducking from desk to desk. Maybe there's roads where like you're hopping from car to car if there's a zombie horde or something, but it's a little bit different where the navigation starts to shine, where it's less of, hey, I just need to get through this office space, and that may take me an hour to slowly get through it. Instead, it's, hey, I need to get from one end of the city to the other. And that hour could be covering a long distance that you weren't covering in those sort of tight spaces. And one of the things I really like about these outdoors is, we've talked about it in other videos, and we even have a mechanic breakdown on landmarking and how landmarking works. But although when you're navigating these outdoor spaces, it's not always apparent where to go. They always offer you this like landmark to search for. A lot of times it's like, hey, we're looking for the Capitol building, and the Capitol building has the rotunda and it's very clearly designated. Or in part 1, you have, well, we're going to the university, and really all we know is we're looking for the shiny building. And you can kind of look around and see like, okay, well, there's the shiny building. I now know where to go. And you can orient yourself very quickly. You see it like anytime it's get to the hospital, whether that's in the Salt Lake level, or you do it again in Seattle, you can kind of look for the big red cross on any of the buildings. You know, hey, that's going to be the hospital. Or down the road, you get like the Ferris wheel in Seattle, where it's visible from miles and miles away, but you know where you're going. Even within game design, you have little mechanics as well that help you know where to go, that kind of help you wayfind and get where you're going. Part 2 has the thumbstick click for that. It orients the camera and highlights the direction that the next spot you're supposed to be going for. I can't remember if that was in part 1 or not, but in part 2, I use that a lot. Sometimes you get kind of lost. You're navigating and moving, and then you come across a horde or someone that you have this battle with, and you get disoriented a little bit, and you're like, okay, now that I've defeated these enemies, what direction was I heading? And you could use that thumbstick to kind of reorient yourself a little bit. And that's nice. It's almost the same way you would use like a breadcrumb trail on a website. If you get too deep down where you've clicked on an item and then you're looking at the frequently purchased together, and you start getting to this point where you're like, oh crap, I can't get back to my search results. You can use things like breadcrumb trails. You can use search history and that kind of stuff to kind of get back to where you need to go. And it works a lot of the same ways. Like when you're thinking about getting lost and getting back to where you need to go, it's all that same kind of psychology. You also have the story-driven levels where there's little to no action. You don't have a ton of spots where you're like, hey, this is really high action, where it's maybe just a lot of dialogue, or it's flashbacks and that kind of stuff. Some of my favorites here are meeting Tommy initially. Like when you first get to Jackson, you have a lot of dialogue with Tommy. I mean, Joel and Tommy are now meeting back up for the first time in theoretically years, and there's a lot of catching up to do, and there's a lot of kind of back and forth as you're wandering the Jackson complex. In the end, that kind of turns to action towards the end of that chapter, but that first part of that chapter is just really dialogue heavy. You also have the museum flashback in part 2. It's kind of some of everyone's favorite, like being able to walk around the dinosaurs and just Joel and Ellie are talking to each other, and you're kind of remembering this relationship that you had with Joel. I mean, again, spoilers, but this is like one of the first flashback sequences with Joel after he's been killed, and it's kind of your first step back into like, hey, we are going to revisit this character despite his death. We're going to go back and he's going to remain a part of this series. You have pretty much all of the mall in the DLC, in the Left Behind DLC. Same thing, like you're kind of walking around the mall, but it's really just Ellie and Riley kind of chatting it up, talking about the Fireflies, talking about what Riley's gonna do. Ellie should come with her. You're kind of walking around the like Halloween store and trying on masks and just joking around. And it's a lot of dialogue before you really get to the action in those fights. And you have the same, one of my favorites is when you're playing with Abby, you have Abby and Yara in the aquarium, and you're kind of walking around, you're trying to find these other characters and figure out what you're going to do. And there's a point where you're playing with the dog, like the dog comes up to you and you're teaching Yara to like play fetch with the dog. And it starts out like they're scared of this dog, and they don't know if they should play fetch. They've been attacked by these dogs before, and it's kind of an interesting game dynamic where it's very simple. It's not a high pressure situation, but it's painting a picture. It's giving character development. It's kind of fleshing in the story while still being interactive. You're still learning about these characters, but it's not a cutscene. You're not setting your controller down for this extended period of time. It's still part of play. And Last of Us does this incredibly well. This really is just a linear story that's interactive, but it does a great job of piecing together these moments of control versus cutscene. And there's very few cutscenes. Like you're honestly playing a lot of this game, and it's done in this form where the story is told while you still have control of the thumbstick, and it's a beautiful way to tell a story. Then you have the incredibly high action levels and segments where you have full control. There's very little dialogue. It is things are coming at you incredibly fast, and I love the way that a few of these levels do. You have kind of the initial level in part one, sort of that escape with Sarah. You have the car crash. You get separated from Tommy. You end up having to make these like very quick decisions without any direct violence per se. It's just kind of this left, right, like what do we do? Get out of the car, go through this store, like meet up with me later. Tommy's kind of calling out orders, like Joel's carrying Sarah part of this, and it's just kind of a really intense segment right off the bat. It's kind of your first intro into this game, and it sets the tone for some of these other action levels. You get the same at the end of the chapter in part one with Bill. You're trying to push the truck down the street, and Bill's back there with you. You're playing as Joel, and you and Bill are pushing the truck. Ellie's getting it started. You're really trying to like push the truck a little bit, and then you have to stop and fight some zombies. Then you push the truck a little bit, fight some zombies, and it's a really intense level where that action is kind of cranked up from what you're used to. There isn't another. You don't have the option to like sneak through these levels. And hey, how do we mix the sneak mechanics with the action mechanics? In that truck level, it's 100% action. There's not really a way to avoid those zombies. You really got to get that truck started. In part two, you have the chase down of Nora as Ellie. Nora's running through this hospital, getting away from you, and you're busting open doors, and Nora's throwing cabinets in front of them, and you're really trying to like get through this level just really, really fast and catch her. And there's not that time to like stop and think like, hey, should I go this way or should I go that way? It is just an action-packed chase. And you see a lot in later in part two, you have the escape from the island as Abby, where you're partially on a horse, you're running, you're really trying to get off this island, and everything kind of comes to a bulkhead there for a second, where Wolf, the Seraphines or Seraphites are like all battling, and you're kind of in the middle of it, just trying to get off this island. You're not really taking either of those sides. You and your crew are just trying to get off of that island as quick as possible. And that action, again, is incredibly tense. It's incredibly high action. You have a lot of QuickTime events in this game. For anyone unfamiliar with QuickTime events are this concept of you're going through a thing and then you have a really quick button press response. So you're walking through a thing and then something will jump out and grab you, and you've got to quickly start mashing X to get the thing off of you. And one of the games that made it popular is the God of War series. Is kind of cited as one of these, like, the first game to really drive home quick time events. I mean, you have games previously using it, but God of War was one of the first hugely popular games that characterized quick time events. I mean, it goes back to like Dragon's Lair. If you look at it, is almost predominantly quick time events. Like, that is how Dragon's Lair works. And so that's kind of the grandfather of the quick time event. But in modern gameplay, you've started mixing quick time events with standard gameplay and kind of created these experiences. And I think Last of Us uses quick time events incredibly well. You have the Pittsburgh escape. You're kind of going through Pittsburgh, and you have that moment where Joel gets taken down into the puddle, and Ellie kind of has that, like, the first kill moment. That quick time event is powerful, and that's kind of what it is. Like, hey, how do you make these snap decisions? How do you as a player decide, yep, I'm gonna do this? And you see it at the end of part 1 where Joel kills the doctor, which more or less sets up all of part 2. You have that same quick time event. Some of these you can't avoid, like in the case of killing the doctor, you can't necessarily avoid it, but it is that, like, hey, like, you're in a high pressure situation. Can you react to that thing? And you have quick time events in the form of, like, starting generators, like generators and engines, like in the boat and that kind of stuff, where these quick time events are just little things that are used as a simple gameplay mechanic within the level design. And starting those generators or engines, whenever you come across them, you're like, okay, it's the quick time event again. And that one's more or less like the old, I always call it the punting mechanic, because that's what, like, a lot of the old Madden games used, is that, like, okay, press it at the bottom, press it at the top, and that's how you punt the ball or kick a field goal. But those types of quick time events as well can be used to break up gameplay and not make it so you're not taking the player out of the element. They have something to do, even if it's a simple gameplay element. There's not a complex system to starting those generators, but that very light gameplay gives you something to do instead of a cutscene where the player gets taken out of that gameplay. And that's really what you want to do, is you want to keep your players involved and avoid cutscenes as much as possible. At least make it feel like they're doing something, and quick time events are a great way to do that. You even get some light puzzles. Like, you don't think of Last of Us as a puzzle game, but there are puzzles to this level design. You have, like, using the rafts to get Ellie across water. In part 1, Ellie can't swim. Like, she hasn't learned to swim. So you've got to, anytime you come across these, I hate to call them water levels, because they're generally not water levels, but getting Ellie across bodies of water, you've got to use the pallets or use these floating items to kind of get her in, move her around. Maybe she has to go first, then you go, that kind of stuff. And same thing with moving planks and ladders and even pianos. There's spots where you're, like, rolling pianos along to create platforms, and you've got to use your elements around you in the level. You've got to use these pieces of the level to move around, get to different places, and sort of figure out this order of operations. Okay, I've got to use the ladder to get to here, then I move this item, then I can pick the ladder up from where I was and bring it to the next part. And you're kind of doing this, like, step-by-step sort of puzzle solving, which is kind of an interesting thing. You don't think of this as a sort of puzzle game, but you utilize that. And you get, like, the flooded basement in Pittsburgh is an interesting one. That level almost had, like, Zelda water temple vibes to me, where it's like, okay, you've got to utilize, like, down and under, and then you come up, and then maybe you move this item over so that you can go under the water again. And it was kind of this mix of, like, raising and lowering the water levels to get to where you need, which was interesting. It was a different type of gameplay than you were used to for most of this game, and it broke it up nicely. You have the water dam controls outside of Jackson as well. That one got me tied up for a little bit, I remember, as I was playing through, where I couldn't wrap my head around the, like, how to stop the dam control so that both you and Ellie could cross the dam, getting into Jackson in part 1. But those little puzzles did help break up that gameplay, and it's kind of nice to vary those elements. You often don't think about how many elements and how many mechanics go into a game like this, but I mean, there's quite a few. You're starting to layer and layer and layer these different mechanics and use them a little bit different in each level. And kudos to the level design team in this game for keeping those mechanics fresh and not just repeating the exact same puzzles, but kind of having them vary from level to level. One of the things I love about the level design too is the replayability of this game is kind of baked in. Finding safe combos, so that you can unlock the safes and get further advancement chains and character upgrades. Like, I didn't by any means like fully complete this game. I left a ton of where I would find half of a safe code, or maybe I found the code to the safe but couldn't find the actual safe, and I didn't want to spend a ton of time looking around for that safe. And all of that is kind of baked in. And then in part 2, you have Ellie trying to find the trading cards and Abby trying to find the coins. As far as I'm aware, there's no other purpose. There's no other gameplay element purpose for those 2 collectibles other than just, hey, I want to replay this to try to find all the trading cards or find all of the state coins. And that's an interesting mechanic where you're baking that into the level design. And as a level designer, it's not hard. You know your level like the back of your hand. So there's countless places where you're like, oh yeah, there is this little corner over here that you wouldn't otherwise go. The story doesn't bring you to this corner, but if you're really exploring, I could definitely put a coin or a trading card there, and it rewards the players for kind of getting around to the parts of the level that you wouldn't otherwise have been looking at. And that can be kind of fun as a level designer, kind of thinking about like, hey, maybe I'll build a little cubby under here where you do have to duck and crawl, but then as you come up, there's this area where I've hidden these little collectibles. It's kind of fun. One of my favorite games to do this was the original Portal, where you kind of have the Ratman nests. Same kind of thing. Like, I loved kind of just exploring those levels, and if you got yourself into a weird situation, you could sometimes find these Ratman things, and the whole cake is a lie mechanic is born out of that as well. Looking back at the level design, really, some of my favorite levels in this game, or this series, I mean, we're talking 3 games, 2 games and a DLC. I mean, being from Salt Lake City, that arrival moment in Salt Lake City, the Salt Lake City skyline, it isn't perfect. Like, it's not a spitting image of the Salt Lake City skyline, even circa when part 1 came out, but they got it pretty good. Like, you can kind of tell you have the mountains, you have some of the key buildings in the background, and that moment with the giraffe and kind of making your way to the hospital was fun for me just because I am a Salt Lake City native, so it was kind of fun to see what they did with my city in this game. And I'm sure others that, like anyone from Seattle, probably has the same feelings about part 2, I would assume. And it's kind of fun to sort of see that. And you also get this again, you start to see Salt Lake City come back into it. You see it making your way to the hospital was fun initially, but then in the flashbacks, like the flashback in part 2 where Ellie learns about Joel's secret, again, you're back in Salt Lake City, you see that skyline, and a ton of the Abby and Owen flashbacks utilize Salt Lake City as well. You have the hunt for the zebra with her dad, and when Owen starts building out the aquarium, he has the mural of Salt Lake City on the wall. So it's kind of fun to see those. That skyline is something that I look out my window and can see every day, and so it's kind of fun to sort of see that from a gameplay mechanic. So that's always fun. I think the burning restaurant escape, like in part 1, when Ellie's escaping the cannibals, is a beautiful boss moment. You kind of take the script and flip it on its head. You're now playing as Ellie for the first time in that chapter, and it really takes, you can't brute force this boss. You have to sneak. You kind of have to sneak around, use your sort of hearing abilities, and try to pinpoint where that guy is and find him and sneak around to the back. You can't just take the guy on with brute force. It was a unique gameplay moment that took you out of maybe what you were doing prior. The museum flashback is also, it's obviously incredibly emotional. Like we mentioned before, it is kind of your first, like, going back to Joel after the death. And it's wonderful dialogue. You're having great conversations, and they're talking about like Joel, without naming the movie Jurassic Park, is like talking about this like, hey, yeah, there was this movie where they brought dinosaurs back to life and blah, 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 blah. It's just kind of a fun and sort of interesting moment. I always loved dinosaurs as a kid too. So walking around and seeing the dinosaurs and seeing that museum aspect. I loved the Natural History Museum here in Salt Lake. So it's fun to kind of play that. And you have that astronaut moment as well, that sort of touching Ellie and Joel scene that's kind of one of the most powerful moments in all of part 2. It's a beautiful level. And then there's also like, they're really small moments, but I just loved the arcades. Like you have the arcade in the DLC where Ellie's kind of pretending to play the fighting game. She's closing her eyes and Riley's off to the side explaining what's going on. And that was a really unique gameplay moment. It was something different than you had done at any point in part 1. And it doesn't ever repeat itself, but it's really a sort of sweet moment between Ellie and Riley talking about this game that Ellie didn't get a chance to play and Riley loved. And they're sort of sharing this moment together through imagination. And it's kind of a beautiful sort of moment. And then in part 2, it's a very small moment, but you're in that broken arcade where I think you have to fight like one of the tank zombies, and there's these broken machines and stuff are everywhere, and you have a prize counter where there's like stuffies and other stuff like on the wall. It's kind of interesting to see like, hey, what would happen in an apocalypse? Like, how would these points in our life, these places in our life that we love, what would they look like after this type of event? It was kind of interesting to see those arcades, and Seattle in particular in part 2, you have like signs for Comic-Con. There's basically a Comic-Con that was either going on or was about to happen in Seattle when things broke out. And it's kind of just a nice homage to game culture in general. I mean, game culture and Comic-Con culture were all kind of like interwoven into one. And so it's kind of a fun call out to all of that sort of culture. I'll give another spoiler warning before we talk about this next thing, because again, like just talking about this is going to spoil a number of things. But one of the things outside of level design that Last of Us uses is what I sometimes refer to as other shoe design, where you switch your playable character. Instead of just saying like, I'm always going to play as Joel, or I'm always going to play as this other character, you move that around and you kind of put on that other character's shoes. And I think it's really powerful in The Last of Us. In part 1, it's Joel and Ellie, and you really only have Ellie for that one chapter where Joel's injured and she's trying to find the medicine. But in that chapter, it's incredibly powerful. You get a sense of her skills. You kind of realize you can't use the brute force that Joel has. She needs to be maybe a little bit sneakier and methodical about her movement. And you really start to utilize like the bow and arrow that Joel didn't use. And you're being more quiet. You're being more secretive. And that switch is really interesting. Then obviously, as you get to part 2, you're switching around a ton. You're starting as Joel, then you're switching to Ellie, and as you get through half of the story, you then switch to Abby and more or less replay those 3 days in Seattle as a completely different character in a different mindset, different location. And that's why I refer to it as the other shoe design. Is you really have to put yourself into those shoes. And going into that segment, like you're playing as Ellie, and you want to kill Abby. Like, you're really searching for her in Seattle. Your goal is to get rid of Abby, and you've played the whole game up to that point. And then you make that switch and you start learning more. You start out your play as Abby, like sharing this moment with her dad, and her dad are talking and conversing, and you realize like, yeah, she really did lose her father there in Salt Lake City. And you start to build this empathy. And I mean, a lot of people just didn't take the time to do that. They were just like, no, to hell with Abby. I don't care about playing this part. But as you start to play, you start to build an empathy for Abby, as quite honestly, she's building an empathy for the Seraphites and for potentially like other people. And she starts to realize, like, having left the Fireflies and joining Wolf, maybe Wolf isn't the good guys that she thought they were. Like, maybe the Fireflies had something that Wolf doesn't, and she was kind of left between a rock and a hard place after Salt Lake City. And it's kind of interesting to see the way that that slowly plays out. And you go through this emotional roller coaster playing as Abby, because it shows her vulnerability, and it shows maybe where she's coming from. And you do start to have a little bit of empathy for her and feel like, hey, I do sort of understand where she's coming from and how she's dealing with it. She's dealing with the death of her father. She's more or less lost her boyfriend. I know that they had obviously split up, but there's points in this game where that becomes questionable as well. You learn about the sort of Seraphites like firsthand. You're kind of learning like, what is their culture like as you're exploring the city. With the Seraphite, you're kind of learning like, hey, they have a completely different way of living than us. And as you go through it, maybe you're learning like, hey, it's maybe not so different from us, and maybe there's something we could learn from one or another. And it's really interesting to sort of see that other shoe design. You see the character switching in a lot of different games. Like obviously esports titles have a lot of that. I mean, Overwatch, League of Legends, even like a Mario Kart, you may have a main, like what people refer to as a main, where it's like, hey, this is the main character I play, but you're maybe switching characters all the time. Maybe it's like, hey, we need someone who can play as a tank, or we need a healer, or we need these different character archetypes. You're making that active switch. Other games that do this well from a storytelling perspective, the Lego games come to mind. I mean, the Lego games have potentially hundreds of playable characters, and you may need to play different ones to unlock a level fully. You may need, hey, we need this character that can climb to get to this secret area, and maybe we need this character that's brute strength to break through this door and get to this secret area. And you're kind of going back and forth from these different characters all the time to get to these different places or understand these different parts of the story. Or maybe you can't pass a level unless you have a character that can fly. And I think the Lego games handle that incredibly well. If you haven't played through at least one of the Lego titles, I mean, there's hundreds now at this point with all the different fandoms. Choose one of the fandoms that you like, be it Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. I think they have Lego games for all of those now. Choose one of them and just play through one of the games and kind of see how that design plays out. It's really interesting the way that the character switching happens. And you saw that a little bit in The Last of Us. I mean, Abby had some things that Ellie didn't have, and Joel had some things that Ellie didn't have, but primarily it was all still third person and didn't drastically change. But it would be interesting to see if that did, to see if those happened. As far as the software and especially the learning and development space, I work with a lot of companies where you use this sort of other shoe design in learning and development in the form of role switching, or sales training does this a ton, where you're putting yourself into the shoes of a customer, or you're putting yourself into the shoes of someone that's learning your software, and you're going through this sort of mental model to go, oh, okay, now I see why I maybe need to explain that more. Now I see why this part of the software is important, because me as a super user didn't think of that. But if I put myself into a new user, then I can start to figure this out. And so you see that other shoe design in the L&D space a lot. I really like using it within that space because it does shift your mindset. I think a lot of times as teachers or as trainers, we know something so well that we forget to put ourselves back into that beginner shoe. And it's kind of key in that space. You've got to take yourself back and sort of role play as those other people that you're dealing with. Last of Us is a game that also uses death as a driver of story. I cannot think of a game that utilizes the concept of death as a narrative driver as much as The Last of Us. I mean, again, spoilers abound, but you have games that have had like one key death or maybe even a couple of key deaths, or definitely games where your player characters die, but it's sort of these one-offs. I mean, the one that obviously comes to mind is like Aerith or Eris in Final Fantasy VII. Is, if you ask people about like the most powerful video game death of all time, that's almost assuredly number one on the list. And it's incredibly powerful, but it is that, like, it's one-off. And you kind of move on and you realize, like, I'm gonna just have to live without that character the rest of the way. But it doesn't necessarily like build the entire story of Final Fantasy VII around that. One that always hit me hard is, if anyone's familiar with the Baldur's Gate series, in Baldur's Gate 1, your sort of first character that you come across besides you is the main character is Emmeline. And she sort of sticks with you the entire game, and you build up her stats and get her incredibly powerful because she's kind of with you most of the time. And then if you go into Baldur's Gate 2 and carry over your save, she retains those abilities. So you have this really powerful character, and then right at the start of the game, the wizard comes and kind of takes her away. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, that was like, outside of me as the main character, like, that's probably my next most powerful character. And you play the majority of that game without her, and you kind of have to learn to deal with that in that gameplay. And you have the same in Halo. I think Halo 2, Halo 2 or 3, I can't remember, but you leave Cortana behind, where it's like, hey, I've been working with Cortana both of these games, these first two games, and you get to that point where Cortana's like, nope, like, the only way this is gonna work is you have to leave me here. You have to leave me in this ship so that I can do what I need to do.
Is everything all right?
Last of Us uses your attachment to these characters to drive the theme. Like, I mean, it is called The Last of Us for a reason. Like, everyone is dying off. It's like, as soon as you build a relationship and build attachments and learn and understand a character, they're gone. It's just like over and over and over. And it really drives this narrative of like, hey, we really are The Last of Us. Everyone we meet, everyone we come across, the likelihood of death is so high that you really cannot rely on anyone. And that more or less sets the entire character tone for Joel. Like, Joel's entire character is built around this, like, I really cannot trust or attach myself to anyone because I never know when they will be gone. And I mean, this game starts right out of the gate with the death of Sarah. Like, and it sets Joel down this, I hate to call it a dark path, but like, to a certain extent, like, it sets Joel down a dark path that sets up the events of the entirety of the game. And so right out of the gate, you're dealing with death. And I mean, it is a zombie apocalypse, so it makes sense, but like, I haven't seen a game deal with this much death as Last of Us does. And not too far into the game, you start to build a character relationship with Tess, and you kind of realize like, hey, Joel and Tess are kind of like partners in crime, and you don't know where their relationship is headed. You don't know really where it is. Like, are they together? Aren't they together? And right as you start to get an understanding of some of that, like, Tess sacrifices herself. And so once again, you're just really starting to get to this, like, hey, this really is The Last of Us. Like, there is not much of us. And then you sort of find a friendly, I mean, not really friendly, but at least not combative person in the form of Bill. And then the Bill and Frank saga kind of plays out through notes and through conversations. And though you don't like explicitly see Bill die or see what happens with Frank, you just kind of hear, it's more or less a hearsay kind of thing, but you still kind of feel that loss. You almost feel Bill's pain at the end of that. And when he's kind of like, just call us even, stay out of my town, you sort of feel that moment where you like, we just kind of got to the point where we were befriending you, and then the letter from Frank like really turned you, and now we've lost you. And right after that, you meet Sam and Henry in Pittsburgh and get to know them, and Ellie and they start kicking it off, and then you get that turn, and then both of them die. It's just over and over and over, and you really start, your characters start to use this sort of betrayal and death as a means to an end. And that's kind of where it comes to that climax in Salt Lake, where Joel is kind of confronted with that, like, is the only other person I have gonna die here? And it's that moment where like, he is just person after person after person. It's just loss. And you can kind of feel for him. You realize like, hey, every single person you get attached to dies. And he has that moment again with Ellie where it's like, this time I have an opportunity to try to save it. Do I want to? Should I? And in the end, obviously you do, but he has to question that as a character. The DLC albeit small, is the same thing. Like, you really become attached to Riley. You have this conversation, you're wandering through the mall, you more or less, Riley and Ellie are sort of falling in love. And as soon as you get that attachment, it's ripped away from you. It is back to the like, hey, I am a one-person show. Like, it's just me. It's me against the world. And that's where it always works its way down to. And I mean, obviously you have the doozy. Part 2 starts off with a bang, in that the first hour or two of gameplay, you lose Joel. Like, you go into this game, like, having played as Joel 75% of the time in part 1, you expect to continue that. And within the first couple of hours, like, who was your main character is gone. And you're kind of left as Ellie, and you feel that. Like, you've made these attachments to Joel. I mean, I played through part 1, and by the end of it, like, I have a little bit of Joel in me. Like, I'm a bit of a girl dad. And so traveling across the zombie infested country with this, what grows to become a daughter of his, it hits you emotionally. Like, you feel for Joel, you feel his vulnerability, you feel that sort of protection that he's putting up, and to lose him, like, it hit. Like, it was a pretty devastating part of part 2. And I mean, Abby more or less loses everyone. I mean, through the course of the Abby playthrough, you're witnessing your father's death multiple times. Like, you have multiple iterations of that hospital flashback where you're running into that operation room, and some of them it's your dad, some of them it's the Seraphites. Like, you're replaying that moment in your life over and over. And by the time it's said and done, Abby has lost everyone that was with her there in Jackson. I don't think anyone from Jackson remains. Like, Ellie gets rid of everyone in that party, and it is just Abby left. And just constant loss, sacrifice, revenge, vengeance. These are all key emotions in the way that Last of Us tells its story. And I haven't played a game that uses those emotions in the same way that Last of Us does. And I mean, it was incredibly powerful. It was a powerful game, and albeit sad in moments, like, emotionally it stuck with you more than many other games. It's not what we refer to sometimes as dumb fun, where it's just like, hey, I'm gonna smash some stuff and save the princess or whatever. Like, this game leaves an emotional toll on you, which is exactly what Naughty Dog was trying to impose there. We talked about it a little bit with the level design, but I love the way that you mix stealth and action, and your ability to kind of choose. Do I want to take a stealthy route? Maybe I'm low on resources and I need to sneak my way around, or maybe I have plenty of resources and I'm gonna throw a few Molotovs and really go high action on this sequence. And you really get to have some fun with it and try it yourself. Part 1, I played pretty heavy action. I didn't use stealth a ton, but once I got to part 2, I realized as Ellie, like, the stealth is imperative. Like, you cannot take on some of these moments as Ellie with brute force. Like, you have to utilize stealth, in my opinion, more than you did in part 1. I mean, you can take down about 75% of a horde, and then maybe take the rest by force. But you've got to get rid of 3/4 of them by sneaking around and using stealth kills and doing that kind of stuff. And it's kind of interesting. You have some moments that can't use stealth. Like, I remember the little mini tank in Pittsburgh in part 1. Like, there's no way to sort of take that on. I tried multiple times to see if I could, like, get a Molotov in the window, or if I could shoot the driver, or if I tried to go like Halo style. Like, I always loved in Halo, like, mounting the Banshees and, like, throwing the bomb on them and blowing them up. I tried to do that multiple times, but you really just can't. Like, you have to sneak around that tank, and it forces you in sometimes. Sometimes you're forced to use brute force. Sometimes you're forced to use stealth. But sometimes you can choose. You can choose, do I want to sneak around, or do I want to use that brute force? And that illusion of choice, or in this case, it's a real choice, is a gameplay element. And having this variance in design can keep things fresh too. A lot of times, if this game were all action and you didn't have those down moments, those narrative levels or the sneak levels, it would be too much. Like, this game would be too much if it were action, action, action. It would be too long. And you see this a lot in software gamification design, in my opinion. you sometimes see that overwhelming. You see too many things going on at once. You have leaderboards combined with bonuses, combined with challenges and all these things. And one software that comes to mind, in my opinion, is Duolingo. Like, I love Duolingo and I love the gamification of learning another language, but man, it can be overwhelming. I don't, between the like congratulating friends and having a leaderboard and you're getting these bonuses and you have 3x XP for the next 30 minutes and things are just coming at you all the time. It's almost like Temu. Like Temu is the same kind of way where it's like every time I look at Temu, I'm getting a spinner and then I have 5 free items and I've got to choose them in 30 minutes. And it can be a turn, like for a lot of player types, that's just too much. You're doing way too much and it's go, 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 go. You really need to break it up. You need to kind of learn the difference between action all the time and having action elements combined with the slower elements, where maybe it's something where I am being a little more methodical and I can take some time and it's not a rush. Like maybe in between all of those leaderboards and bonuses and challenges, maybe I can take some time to build an avatar where I'm not timed and it's a little bit of a creative. I'm switching from left and right brain effectively, and mixing those up kind of keeps your users from becoming overwhelmed, because it can very, very quickly become overwhelming. Weapons and supplies are scarce in this game, and we really utilize scarcity as a game mechanic. You don't think of it a lot of times, but the scarcity in this game is one of its core mechanics. You're finding one bullet here, maybe another bullet there. You can only have the couple of weapons on you. If you want to switch from a rifle to a shotgun, you've got to actively like stop and get down and take the shotgun out of your backpack and choose. Like the scarcity is an important element of this game. It's unlike something like a Doom or Duke Nukem or Serious Sam, where it's like there's ammo everywhere, there's 16 guns and you're switching between them all the time. Like you really have to think about things in this game. It feels apocalyptical in that way, which it should, where, hey, if I find 1 or 2 bullets here, that's valuable. Like those 1 or 2 rifle bullets can make the difference between me getting through this section and not getting through this section. And I think scarcity as a mechanic is something that's underutilized. There's not a ton of other games that utilize that scarcity as a true game mechanic. And I think it's really fun. And a lot of times, and I was playing on the easier modes than the more difficult, but anytime you come across resources and it's like, oh, my resource is full, I found myself kind of like kneeling down and going, okay, well, my gas is full, or my sharp objects are full. Maybe I'll craft a couple of bombs real fast. I'll see whatever I'm low on and craft some stuff to fill those up so that I can pick up more of those resources. And same with the guns. Like maybe I'm like, oh, I haven't used my shotgun in a while and it says my ammo's full, but if I equip it and then reload it, maybe I can pick up those couple more. It kind of makes you start thinking about like health packs and bombs and those kinds of things in a different way, where it's like, hey, if I have the resources here, I need to make sure to craft whatever I can. And the crafting system allows you to choose that itself. This is a really interesting crafting system, which, we'll touch on here in a second, but it really allows you to choose how you want to play. Do you want bombs versus health packs and that kind of stuff? And the difficulty settings have an effect on this as well, which is interesting. Instead of just having the difficulty settings change health, where you have less health, enemies have more health, weapons do less or more damage, you find more things too. That scarcity gets changed. Instead of a drawer where there maybe was 1 bullet, maybe on easy mode, it has 3 bullets or 4 bullets. And so it starts to make the game a little bit easier to play, which is interesting. A lot of times you choose your difficulty setting and it just changes the health. But it's kind of interesting and fun to see that change the world around you as well. The upgrade system is fun in this game as well. You have collectibles, and really talking about crafting in whole, because crafting is the upgrade system, it's the item system. So kind of looking at this in whole, you're collecting parts for upgrades. You're collecting, like in part 2, you're collecting pills which allow you to upgrade your character abilities as opposed to your weapon abilities. And then you have the resources collectibles in crafting, where you're collecting rags and fuel and sharp objects and these different things that you can make a med pack, or you can make a Molotov, or you can make a pipe bomb, or you can make a trap. Like, you have all these different things that you're crafting, and it's interesting because you kind of get to choose. Like, as far as the weapon upgrades, I really focused on capacity. Like, I would fix capacity the most I could, the quickest I could, because as you start to find bullets, the scarcity of those bullets, you want to be able to hold as many as you can so that you're not filling up and running out. And then I would usually start to work towards like a scope. Like, I'd put a scope on the rifle so that I could maybe get a little more distance, where if I wanted to try to pick off a few more people before I moved in closer, I could. The kickback and aim, I remember in part 1, I spent a lot of time fixing the kickback and steadier aim, because that was hard in part 1. In part 2, I scaled down the difficulty setting, so that wasn't as much of an issue, which again, like, having the difficulty setting affect that kind of stuff is really interesting. But the thing that I like about the upgrades to weapons is they felt real. Like, those parts are scarce, but as you find them, you're like, hey, I can makeshift something to give me a little more capacity. And you don't find enough parts to just be willy-nilly upgrading everything all the time. You really do have to choose, like, which weapon, for starters. Like, do I want to do my shotgun or my rifle or my pistols? And you have to choose what you want. Do I want a scope? Do I want capacity? Do I want kickback? You really have to decide. There's not enough parts to go around to just, like, by the end of the game, you've upgraded everything, or at least I didn't find enough parts for that to be the case. So it does feel scarce. You do have to make decisions, which is really interesting. And the same with your character upgrades. You kind of have to choose in part 2 when you're collecting those pills. Same thing. Like, I can't just upgrade everything. Like, I've got to pick and choose and say, like, okay, well, I want to upgrade the things that help me in stealth mode, or I want to upgrade the things that help me in action, hand-to-hand combat. And then you kind of get the interesting standpoint where you make that switch from Ellie to Abby, and that all gets reset. Like, you now have different upgrade chains, and you have different weapons. Like, Abby has different weapons to a certain extent than Ellie has, and you've got to kind of redo that. And that can be a frustrating moment. But again, back to that other shoe design, you really have to reset that mentality and think, like, okay, I've got to start over, and now I can rebuild this different character. And Abby played differently than Ellie did, so it's kind of interesting to have that sort of switch. This game has a lot of little innovations that don't necessarily fit into a category that we've talked about, but are just like aha moments where when it happened, I was like, hey, this is fun. And I love that the designers thought of it. Things like in part 1, when you're listening to handheld recordings and it plays through the controller speaker. Like, the first time that happened, it almost caught me off guard. And I was immediately like, this is a brilliant idea, where instead of it just playing on the TV, like, I now have the handheld recorder playing in my hand like a handheld recorder would. And the PlayStation controller has the touchpad on the top and strumming it to play the guitar. Like, the first time I came across that, I didn't even realize, I don't play PlayStation a lot. Like, I had to borrow a PlayStation from a friend to get through this game. And I didn't realize that was a touchpad. And so strumming that pad to play the guitar was brilliant. I'm like, hey, this is like a really cool element, and it doesn't, like, I don't need it. Like, it's just added innovation, but it's fun. And you have the moments where your flashlight gets faulty a little bit and kind of flickers, and you have to tap the controller on your hand. Again, like, just little things where it's like, you wouldn't think of it in your normal game, but the designers really tried to, like, I know you're holding a controller, but how can we make this controller feel like a real life object? And with a flashlight, if it goes sketchy, the first thing you do is kind of bat on it to see if the batteries are working. And when you play handheld recorders, you're holding it up to your ear and playing the handheld recorder. It was just fun to kind of do that. And same with the dog toy. You'd pick up a dog toy and you would shake the controller to jingle it, and you would kind of squeeze it and that kind of stuff. It just made it feel like, hey, this is a real world. And although I'm holding a controller, that controller takes the form of these other objects, at least the most that it can. I'm not going to make someone like whip out a Guitar Hero controller to play the guitar for that one tiny, or those couple of tiny little scenes, I guess. But it felt different, and it felt like I was putting myself into that world. And you have these other gameplay elements too. You have like the mounted sniper gun in part 1, where there's a lot of code and testing for that one-off sequence. Like, it's a tiny part of a large game that took the time, but it made it feel real. Like, you as Joel kind of got to that gun and you had to protect everyone else that was down below during that sequence. And so again, just like little things like that feel different and innovative, that weren't used ever again, but it helped them tell the story they wanted to tell. The boat, like the boat in Seattle, in the grand scheme of things, is a tiny part of that game, but it was necessary to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Hey, we need this part where Ellie hijacks a boat and we want her to go through the rapids of Seattle to get to the Ferris wheel. And then when the boat overturns, you've got to like struggle in that water to get to the aquarium, and to be able to tell the story that they wanted and not have that just be a cutscene, because they could have taken the cop-out method and just had that whole boat sequence be a cutscene, but they wanted that gameplay. They wanted those elements of play, and instead of something like that. And I think that's sort of brilliant. And the Easter eggs. You have tons of like Naughty Dog memorabilia. You have the toy store with Sam, has like other Naughty Dog games on the shelf. And in the cannabis hideout in part 2, there's the PlayStation on the floor. And again, I think you have some other Naughty Dog games in there. And it's really interesting to see kind of what they do with those Easter eggs, with those hidden mechanics, and just fun little moments. One of my few frustrations with this game is the amount of elements that they have, the amount of mechanics that they have. Some of them just don't get used as often. And so by the time you get to them within gameplay, you maybe have either forgotten the controls or forgotten that it even exists. There were these moments where I would get stuck in levels and I didn't know where to go or what to do, because the element that I needed, I had kind of forgotten about. Maybe it was a couple of hours of gameplay since I used it, or a couple of levels, or sometimes I play like a game this size. I sometimes have to play in chunks where maybe I play for a week and then I have to take a week off because I'm on a work trip or something, who knows? But by the time I come back to it, or I get to some of these things, I've kind of forgotten the elements. And it's kind of interesting to see the way that they do that. Like, one that comes to mind is the diving underwater. Like, I consistently forgot that, like, oh yeah, you can dive underwater. And in some cases you have to, you're stuck and you've got to dive under an element to come back on the other side. And there were at least a couple of levels where I forgot about that mechanic and didn't realize, like, hey, I like the approach to the hospital in Seattle is one that I remember where I kind of forgot, oh yeah, I can dive underwater. And listening, like, the listening element falls more on me. Like, I just kind of forgot that mechanic. But as I would be sneaking around buildings, I would sometimes die frequently in certain things before I realized, like, oh yeah, I've got to use my listening mechanic to try to pinpoint where these people are. I would keep getting like caught from behind, and I would forget that I have that like sort of like spidey sense listening mode. And again, like, that one is on me as a player, but sometimes you got to give those nudges. If it's been a week since I've hopped into this game, or I haven't used that mechanic in a long time, I will forget the controls, or I will forget that it even exists. The other thing that I get a lot of in this game is, because of that scarcity, I would not use items. Like, I would be afraid I'm not going to use my Molotov cocktail because I don't know what's coming up next. I don't know if I'll need it later. And in the end, I end up hoarding these things. Like, I end up becoming a hoarder of items. It's this like Plyushkin syndrome, if anyone's familiar with that, but it's like the hoarding syndrome, where you're afraid to get rid of something because you don't know when you'll need it. This is like one of the few games where, like, I really that Plyushkin syndrome got hit home for me, where I don't want to use the med pack because I don't know if there's going to be another thing coming up where I should save it for later. And same with the bombs and the Molotovs and all of that, where I found myself hoarding these things. And then by the end of the game, I have a full inventory of stuff where I look back and I'm like, yeah, I should have been more judicious with using all of these items, which is kind of interesting for a game like this. This game really is, in my opinion, the ambiance king/queen. I mean, the way that the ambiance of the level design, of the sound design, everything, just the story is told through that ambiance. You have these overgrown cities and landscapes. They tell the story of civilization simply shutting down. You have cars stopped on freeways. You have greenery like overtaking everything, like cars, everything. You have animals out in the wild. The spores, like when you enter somewhere with spores, you have that, like, there's a real sense of like dread and awareness that you have where, like if someone rips off this mask, I will die. Like I fear losing that mask. And so you avoid head-to-head confrontation, and that mask like hinders things as well. So like you can't hear as well, and your hearing sort of gets muffled and that kind of stuff. And that ambiance of, hey, I'm in a spore area really starts to tell that story. And your lowered visibility is in there as well, where I can't see maybe what's more than 20, 30 feet ahead of me because there's that sort of like fog of war going on. And again, like you have notes and books and journals and stuff scattered all over the place. And the ambiance of that, I love games that fill their world with that kind of stuff, where you're entering an office building, and sure, it's just an office building that I've got to get from A to Z, but the people that lived or worked or in a lot of cases bunkered down in this office building, there's notes around that kind of say like, hey, I don't think I'm going to make it through this. If you find this, like, I hope you make it to wherever you're going. Like, it's again, like it's really driving that, like using loss as a driver of narrative. And the soundtrack and score to this game are just absolutely beautiful. I mean, not only do those moments where you have the music, you're really setting a tone, like that music really drives it forward, but sometimes even more important is the absence of that music. Like sometimes when you do not have anything and you are sitting there in silence, it gives power to the moments that do have a score, that do have that music behind them. And that on and off of the music really sets a tone. Like not every fight and standoff needs to have a full heavy orchestra behind it. Halo, for instance, you're getting music all the time, so you don't ever know when it is and isn't a powerful moment. With Last of Us, you have the moments that are quiet. And so the moments that have the music, you know something's coming. It really starts to set that tone. And don't get me wrong, Halo's music is absolutely incredible for the type of game it is. It's a very high action game. But The Last of Us plays with silence in a way that I'm hard pressed to think of a game that plays with silence as well as The Last of Us does. Even the menus have a sense of dread and sort of loneliness to them. Before you start the game, you sort of feel like you're alone and there's very few people left in this world. It's the menu screens and the sort of like there's no music there. It's just you hear the ripples of the water, or you hear these kind of things. It just sets the tone for that ambiance. And there's not a game that handles ambiance as well as this that I can think of. This truly is like the most perfect view of ambiance in game design that I can think of. It sets the tone for everything flawlessly. And so, I mean, kudos to the designers for fleshing out that world and building it out. Thank you for watching this game mechanic breakdown of The Last of Us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something along the way. If you want to choose a game or a topic that I cover, as we say before, like you can do that with a donation to the Extra Life Foundation, which you can do. You see down below. For $25, you can choose a game topic or mechanic. If you want to learn about loot boxes or avatars or trading, who knows what that is. For $25, you can choose that and I'll do a video. For $50, you can choose a full game review, just like this. You can choose a game that I review in full, or potentially even a series, depending on the size. For $100, you not only get to choose the game, but you get to join me. We didn't have a guest join today, but you could join me. If you want to talk about your favorite game and talk about what it means to you and the mechanics you love, you can do that. All the money for those donations goes to the Children's Miracle Network. Specifically, the Primary Children's Hospital here in Salt Lake City is who I do Extra Life for. So those donations are welcome if you want to join me. As always, again, if you like what you've seen here, please like the video, subscribe, comment. I want to have a community. I want to hear what you loved about The Last of Us, or this series, or maybe what you thought about the streaming series or anything like that. Like, join this community. I'm here to talk about these mechanics. I can only cover what I can in this roughly hour-long video. I want to hear from you. I want to continue this conversation in the comments. And if you like what you see, subscribing helps me build this channel, helps me get it to more people, and more people can kind of see this content. So by all means, please like, subscribe. I know everyone asks for it, but it's a very simple thing to do, and the subscribe is free. Liking a video is free. There's no easier way to support content you enjoy than those two things. They're effortless and free. But I thank you for joining me and talking and listening about Last of Us. Like I said, join the comments. Tell me what you loved about this game, maybe your favorite levels or anything like that. I love to hear from you. But again, thank you for joining and watching. We'll see you next time.